Hi class, we're on to the weekly drawing number 5. Um, I just want to make sure you guys know where these things are posted at. And I presume you're all aware of it, but these weekly drawing posts, that the images that you're drawing are right there in that PDF file. So if you open it up, you can actually, you know, scroll down to number 5. It'll say it down here on the bottom, which is Millet's woodcutter trimming faggots and Contecran was the original one. Um, we're going to look at the design for a bit, but also I just want you to realize if you push that button there, it'll expand it out for you full screen. So that's just kind of obvious, but I just wanted to make sure everyone was finding these images in high quality posted in this PDF here. Okay? Also want to make sure you guys are checking your announcements of things that are due and things that are coming up, just to make sure you're staying abreast of that information. You're going to want to keep these checking these tabs, but also you probably want to make it so that you can get the notifications of things. Okay, that would be a good recommendation for you to do. All right, let's look at this piece. I'm going to pull up the slideshow for it. This is a pretty beautifully rendered piece. I really like a lot of the expressive quality he got into it. It's pretty fairly accurate representational style drawing. It's not perfect, but we get a real sense of space and reality coming through in this. I think there's things that are a bit off, like his foot is probably too large if you go and compare it to like his head. But overall, looking pretty good. This is made in Contacrane, like I said, which is like a wax type of or oil based a lot of the time crayon. It comes in different colors. People still use it even to this day. So it's not like charcoal, which is like a dry medium. It's more like a pastel type of vibe. It has oil in it a lot of the time. I do believe they make wax ones, like I said, but I'm actually thinking they're probably mostly oil based. So it gives you a mark similar to charcoal in a way, in that it picks up the texture of the page, or even like a regular wax crayon you would use as a kid. But it has a different kind of quality that's like pastel too, and you can get a finer line than like a block pastel. So it's interesting medium in its own right. A lot of people use these for studies, for painting. People would do a lot of this. I think it's important to recontextualize drawing. A lot of people before, in eras previous to now, would have thought of drawing as really a preliminary type of exercise, something you do to get something else. Um, that's totally fine. And it's still totally a valid way of working with drawing, and one that I encourage. For example, in this class, you do a lot of rough draft drawings and small drawings to get you to your idea to work with another medium. That's totally great. And in sculpture, I have them do the same type of thing, because you need to use drawing to visualize and think about think about something. So you could think of drawing as a tool for that visualization and thinking, but also in its own right, you can have some really beautiful results, which of course most people say, yeah, of course, take that for granted, but not everyone does. So it's important to think about what we're looking at here. What's the beauty of this drawing? When you look at it and just think about, what do you see about it? Maybe you don't think it's beautiful at all, or it's just whatever to you. But when I see it, I kind of have a feeling of, a particular moment in time at a particular place, 1853, of a person doing this activity. And that's kind of interesting in its own way, especially now that we're over 100 years past that. I think what I find most evocative about it is the mark making and the quality of the line and shadow, the way in which these marks are working throughout here. And he's blending and working the shade and shadow, but he's also letting the marks come through and the quality of the contacrane in the background where there's like light, but he's not afraid of it still being a drawing. He's not trying to make it photorealistic like a photo, like we could get with a camera, highly rendered, but he's still got an accurate, realistic sense of light. So this would be very naturalistic, not fully realism, but we can tell more or less what it is, and it's very much representational. And it has more than just a line drawing. There's quite a bit of shadow and shade happening. So we call this value when you see light and dark. Some people also call it chiaroscuro. That's from the Italian light and dark. Millet was a French painter and one of the founders of the Barbizon School in rural France. He's noted for his scenes of peasant farmers, and he could be categorized as part of the realism art movement. So definitely getting into not photorealism, but realism in his paintings and work. For him, the real landscape is not a stage for a play like real people. These are sometimes you see in painting now and even in the past, people treat landscape like it's a stage for a mythological play, and they would depict scenes from mythology and stories and the Bible, but not in a place that was accurate or actual place, more a idealistic place, so that you're like painting the scenery and then you're going to put the actors or players in the middle of the space. He's not working that way. This is for him real landscape and real people. Now there's sort of the critique of this work because people don't like this idea of the hero peasant, like a person who works with the land and is a hero, a heroic rendering of them. Some people don't like that. There's quite a bit of critique of this type of work in contemporary art theory because of that, which I think is maybe appropriate sometime, but also can get into not interesting territory for our purposes. But it has a sort of nostalgia to it, and we can acknowledge the fact that he does make the character feel sort of heroic in a way, nostalgic. But back when he made this would be considered quite a brutish piece of art. Like, why do I say that? Because of what was happening at that time, these kind of free marks, this guy being rendered in his everyday clothes, his some kind of jackets over here. This is not like nicely arranged, perfectly rendered type of territory. So he was an important source of inspiration for Vincent van Gogh, and you can see in that this work it starts to kind of make sense. And Van Gogh even now is kind of idealized, but back then people thought his work was really brutish as well. They weren't used to that, his ways. And Van Gogh took off from this and continued to, you can think of a painting like Potato Eaters, where he has these very real and not realistically rendered, but very gritty scenes of life. Well, this is the same type of thing. And his later landscapes served as an influence on Claude Monet, who we know is the father of Impressionism. So he was an artist who was pretty influential to later forms of more modern art. Um, I should say art that was moving towards more modern art. So it's been a progression over a long period of time. And his desire to like capture more gritty reality moved some of that forward. So this is an interesting one because we see a guy cutting a piece of wood. That's a small piece of wood. That's a faggot. and he's trimming them up for a fire or something. We have some kind of a bushel of hay or something over here bound together. And we get a sense of action and movement, like he's about ready to trim this with a sickle. And his feet are pointing to it. There's a lot of strong diagonals here. And a large section of dark back there, right? For the background, the forest, and then the little light, like we feel the sun breaking through right here. And our eye is the piece is firmly fixed in real space because there's a horizon line. Some of you in your work, I've said in the line drawing one, just you needed to put some kind of a horizon line or sense of place. Well, without this, it's like a floating figure. Even though the background is simple, there's still a feeling of placeness because of that type of stuff. The value, the lightness, the hill. So it's something we can learn from him. He's at kind of the thing, composition is broken up into thirds. There's an idea called the rule of thirds, 1, 2, 3 in design, and he's in the middle of the, almost middle of the third, and not quite in the middle of the drawing paper, the canvas, not actual cloth canvas, but the page. By canvas I mean the image. But his hand is basically in the middle from left to right. It's a little bit below center, and his eyes are a little above it. So we get this sort of feeling of the action being central, but also this movement through the very center of the composition, which is part of the point to draw our eye. We see the figure and he's looking down, so there's sort of a psychic line between this point, his eyes, and the sickle. And it leads our eye around it pretty nicely. When we get here, our eye would be tending to maybe go out the side there, but because of this cloth, it gets us back into this sort of movement. Now, there's a few spots that draw our eye out a little bit right there, but then he brings us back. Maybe depending on our eye path, we could end up back here to it again, or we might be done with looking at it where we've had enough of a look. But there's a visual interest in the way that our eye moves around it. And I think overall, it's pretty balanced as a composition. It has a lot of visual information over here, despite the fact that the main focus is the figure. If you close your eyes and open them really quickly, your eye kind of notices this in the face a lot because we look for faces as a focal point. Here's the main focal point, for me anyway. And also here, this big block of light. If you notice here, this is important. He's left almost a big block of light value in the middle of the composition. And this shows you that the contrast there between all of this mostly having dark lines and darkness makes it pop out a bit. And it's right in that space of that movement of that path between the hand, the face, and the stick. And so that helps keep our eye in this. And then these lines kind of help us move into it as well. So it's an interesting piece. It's well designed and intentional. He wants us to pay attention to this action, this figure, this moment. And so he uses his design chops to work with that. So he's done pretty well to keep us interested in a piece that in essence really is one simple moment of activity, chopping down on a stick with a sickle. So a good piece, in a certain way, a preparatory work, or a study, or him investigating the world from an artist who's not as well known maybe to everyone, but who's been pretty influential with some other figures in more historic, but at the time when they were working, they were pushing the world of art towards more contemporary and modern sensibilities. So he was influential to people. What I mean is people like Vincent van Gogh, who's a post-impressionist, and even Claude Monet, the impressionist. And later he was really fast. Salvador Dali was very fascinated with him. So he definitely had an art career, and then he had a way in which his work continued to inspire people who have, continued to inspire the world of art, the trajectory of art even now. So he's part of the art canon for that reason, as well as his actual own work too. So I think we can see here someone who's really aware of uh, visual sensibilities and has a really good design skill set to bring our attention to this moment in time, and using the full range of his ability, even in this drawing, to do something interesting. So you can see here also, I want to point out how he uses a sort of outline and then shades into it. And I want you guys to try to reproduce this picture like he would have done it, which is he would actually first draw on a decently good contour outline drawing of the figure lightly with a good, nice quality of line. See there, the light lines. And then after he had something that was accurate, he would have come in and he would have had little markers, things to help him do it. And then he would have come in later and added all the shading. And so I want you to try to work like he did and do the markers and do the contour. And then, if you have time, do the shading and try to see how he uses his stroke direction. Try to work in a similar way. If you're working in pencil, use a fine light line, a fine line. You don't have to do it super light because you need to photograph it, but lighter with a tip to get the contour. And then you can use the point of the pencil, but also part of the side of the pencil to do a lot of the shading. So start to try to think about, like you get in here, these details, how you could really get the quality to this line quality when you're doing that. What part of the pencil or charcoal do you use to get that? Okay. So I think that takes us through this piece and says a lot of interesting things about it. Um, and it's a really interesting piece. So we'll leave you with the face of the woodcutter right there. And I hope you guys are doing well and practicing your chops. And through this whole kind of exercise of drawing, you're kind of just connecting to looking at the world, looking at designs, and staying and building your chops as a drawer. Some of you, already had a lot of them, and some of you didn't come into the class with a lot of drawing experience. It's okay. Wherever you're at, just continue to push into it. And by drawing, by looking, that's how we get better drawings and designs. All right, take care, guys.